The unmistakable sound of furniture being rearranged jolted me out of my focus. I removed my headphones and stared at my office door, confused. Mark wasn't supposed to be home for hours. I saved my project file and stepped out into the hallway, following the noise to our living room. The sofa should face east, Walter. It's better feng shui for prosperity, Diane's voice carried from our living room. And those curtains need to be replaced immediately. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I froze in the doorway. My mother-in-law stood in the center of my carefully designed living room, directing Walter as he struggled to move our heavy sectional. The vintage coffee table I'd restored myself had already been pushed against the wall, replaced by a glass-topped monstrosity I'd never seen before. Diane? Walter? What are you doing in my house? My voice came out higher than I intended. Diane turned, her perfectly highlighted bob swinging with the movement, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Elena, perfect timing. We're just helping improve the energy flow in this space. Mark gave us the spare key this morning. He did what? I stepped further into the room, taking in the chaos. 3 suitcases stood by the staircase. A box labeled Proper Kitchen Essentials sat open on my restored hardwood floors. Oh, didn't he tell you? Diane's smile tightened. Our condo is being renovated, and Mark insisted we stay here rather than waste money on a hotel. Such a thoughtful son. We'll only be here for a few weeks. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Mark. Surprise! Mom and Dad needed a place to stay. Their condo flooded. They'll be with us for a bit. Love you. Walter avoided my eyes, continuing to push the sofa across the floor. I noticed now that my grandmother's antique side table had been moved to a corner, replaced by a gaudy lamp with tassels hanging from the shade. I wish someone had consulted me about this, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm in the middle of a major project deadline, and I need quiet to work. Oh, don't worry about us, Diane waved dismissively. We know how to keep to ourselves. Though I have to say, your workspace is rather cluttered. I could help organize it properly. First impressions matter when clients visit, you know. My clients don't visit my home office, I said, and my organizational system works perfectly for me. Well, Diane's voice took on that particular tone I'd come to dread over the 3 years of my marriage to Mark. There's working, and then there's working optimally. Walter, help me move this bookshelf next. Before I could protest further, my phone rang. It was Zoe. I need to take this, I said, stepping back into the hallway. As soon as I was out of earshot, I answered, Zoe, you won't believe what's happening. What's up? We still on for coffee tomorrow? Change of plans, emergency meeting. Now, can you meet me at Bridgetown Brews in 30 minutes? There was a pause. That bad? Worse, I said, watching as Walter carried in another box labeled Proper Decor. My in-laws have moved in, without asking me. I'll be there in 20, Zoe replied. I ended the call and took a deep breath, counting to 10 as I'd learned in therapy. Then I walked back to the living room. Diane, Walter, I need to step out for a bit. We can discuss the living arrangements when I return. Oh, while you're out, Diane called after me. Could you pick up some proper cleaning supplies? Your selection is rather basic. And we'll need fresh flowers for the entryway. First impressions, Elena. I didn't answer, just grabbed my keys and purse and walked out the door, closing it softly behind me. But inside, I was screaming. Zoe was already waiting when I arrived at the coffee shop, 2 lattes on the table and that look of concerned determination on her face that had gotten us through countless crises since college. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said, pushing a mug toward me. More like a hostile takeover. I sank into the chair across from her, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic. 3 years of marriage? And Mark still doesn't understand what boundaries mean when it comes to his parents. What exactly happened? I took a sip of coffee, gathering my thoughts. I was working on the Henderson project. You know, the one with the impossible deadline. Next thing I know, Diane is rearranging my living room furniture while Walter carries in their suitcases. Apparently, their condo flooded, and Mark told them they could stay with us, without asking me first. Zoe's eyebrows shot up. He didn't even text you beforehand? Nope. Just a surprise message after they were all ready. Moving in. I pulled out my phone, showing her Mark's text. And you know what the worst part is? This isn't even the first time he's done something like this. Remember Thanksgiving? When they showed up 2 days early and Diane reorganized your entire kitchen? Exactly. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache forming. I love Mark. But when it comes to his parents, it's like he reverts to being 16 again, especially with Diane. One guilt trip from her and all our agreements about boundaries go out the window. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mark. Mom's making her famous pot roast tonight. Your favorite. I stared at the screen, incredulous. It's not my favorite. I've been vegetarian for 5 years. She knows this. Zoe reached over and squeezed my hand. So, what are you going to do? Before I could answer, my phone lit up with a notification from our banking app. I opened it, my stomach dropping. He just transferred $2,000 to his parents' account. I turned the phone to show Zoe, without discussing it with me. Can he do that? Legally, yes. It's a joint account. I locked my phone, something cold and resolute settling in my chest. But it's my inheritance that bought our house. My salary that pays most of our bills. My savings that funded our renovation. Elena, Zoe said carefully, this isn't just about furniture and house guests, is it? No. I took a deep breath. For 3 years, I've tried to be patient. I've respected the Mitchell way of doing things. I've smiled through Diane's helpful suggestions about how I should dress, decorate, cook, and run my business. I've watched Walter silently back her up while avoiding any real confrontation. And I've waited for Mark to stand up for us, for me, and set boundaries. And he hasn't. No. If anything, it's getting worse. I pulled out my tablet, opening my email. Look at this. Diane emailed my biggest client yesterday, offering suggestions about the project I'm working on for them. She copied Mark, not me. Zoe read the email, her expression darkening. That's completely inappropriate. How did she even get their contact information? From Mark's phone, I'm guessing. He leaves it unlocked around them all the time. I closed the tablet. Zoe, I love Mark, but I'm starting to feel like I married the entire Mitchell family, not just him. Have you told him how you feel? Every time I try, he says I'm overreacting, that his parents are just trying to help, that this is how family works. I looked out the window, watching people pass by. But this isn't help, it's control. And I'm done letting them control my life. What are you going to do? Zoe asked. Again. My phone buzzed once more. This time it was Diane. I've taken the liberty of rescheduling your client meeting tomorrow. Family dinner is more important. Mark agrees. Something snapped inside me. I stood up, gathering my things with deliberate calm. I need to make some calls, I said, starting with my bank and then my lawyer. Your lawyer? Zoe looked alarmed. Elena, are you thinking of... No, I cut her off. Not divorce, at least not yet. But there's something I haven't told Mark or his parents. Something that might finally make them understand that this is my house too, my life. And it's time they respected that. What is it? I smiled, feeling strangely calm for the first time since finding Diane in my living room. My grandmother was very specific in her will. The money she left me came with conditions. One of which is that any property purchased with it must remain solely in my name. Wait, Zoe's eyes widened. Are you saying? The house is only in my name, always has been. Mark knows we bought it with my inheritance, but he never actually read the deed. Neither did Diane, despite her real estate background. She was too busy criticizing my color choices to look at the paperwork. So what are you going to do with this information? I picked up my bag, suddenly feeling lighter than I had in months. I'm going to teach the Mitchells a lesson about respect, property rights, and proper communication. Starting tonight. Zoe's worried expression followed me out of the coffee shop, but I barely noticed. For the first time in our marriage, I held the power to change the dynamic, and I was done being the accommodating daughter-in-law. The Mitchell family dinner was in full swing when I returned home. I paused in the doorway of my dining room, now adorned with Diane's lace tablecloth and candle holders I'd never seen before, taking in the scene. Mark sat at the head of the table, a position he'd never taken before. Diane was at his right, Walter at his left. My usual place had been moved to the far end, distanced from the conversation. A pot roast steamed in the center of the table, with no vegetarian option in sight. Elena, Mark stood, looking relieved. We were getting worried. Mom made pot. Roast. So I see. I remained in the doorway, not moving toward my designated seat. Mark, could I speak with you privately for a moment? Can't it wait? The food's getting cold, Diane interjected. Actually, no. I kept my eyes on my husband. It's important. Mark hesitated, glancing at his mother. Sure. Just give me a minute to... Now, please. My tone left no room for argument. He followed me into the kitchen, confusion written across his face. What's going on? Where have you been all afternoon? Meeting with Ben Rodriguez. The lawyer? Why? I leaned against the counter, studying my husband's face. Do you know who owns this house, Mark? He blinked, thrown by the question. We do. Together. No, I said quietly. I do. Solely. The deed is only in my name. What? That can't be right. When we bought it with my inheritance, you were busy with your promotion. You signed the papers without reading them. The house has always been solely in my name, as required by the terms of my grandmother's will. The color drained from his face. Why are you bringing this up now? Because I've spent 3 years trying to make this a partnership while you've consistently prioritized your parents' wishes over mine. Moving them in without consulting me was the last straw. They needed a place to stay. Their condo flooded. Then you should have discussed it with me first, I said, keeping my voice level. Just like you should have discussed transferring $2,000 to their account this morning. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. His eyes widened. How did you... Joint checking accounts send notifications to both parties, Mark. That's how partnerships work, with transparency and communication. Look, I can explain. I'm sure you can. And I want to hear that explanation. I straightened up. But first, there are going to be some changes around here. What kind of changes? For starters, your parents can stay for 2 weeks. Not a few weeks, or until the renovation is done. 2 weeks exactly. Elena, that's not... Second, my office is off limits, completely. No reorganizing, no suggestions, no interruptions during my work hours. Mom was just trying to help. Third, I continued as if he hadn't spoken, no more financial decisions without discussion. No transfers, no purchases for your parents, nothing. You're being unreasonable, he protested. No, Mark. I've been unreasonably accommodating. And that ends tonight. I pulled a folder from my bag. Ben drew up a rental agreement for your parents. 2 weeks, with clear expectations about respecting our space. A rental agreement? They're family. Yes, they are. And family should respect boundaries. I handed him the folder. Either they sign this tonight or they need to find other accommodations. You can't be serious. I am. And if you're still unclear about how serious, Ben also drew up these. I placed another document on the counter. Separation papers. Just in case we can't come to an agreement about whose house this actually is. Mark stared at the papers, then at me. You'd divorce me over this? I don't want to. But I won't continue in a marriage where I'm treated as a guest in my own home. I met his eyes steadily. I love you, Mark. But I won't be controlled by your parents anymore. And I won't be married to someone who enables that control. Elena, please, the choice is yours. I moved toward the dining room. But first, I think it's time we all had an honest conversation, including your parents. I walked back to the dining room, Mark following close behind. Diane looked up, irritation clear on her face. Finally, the food's getting cold. Honestly, Elena, punctuality is a virtue. So is respecting other people's property, I replied, taking a seat, not at the far end, but directly across from her. Which is something we need to discuss. What's this about? Walter spoke for the first time, looking uncomfortable. I placed the rental agreement on the table. This house belongs solely to me, not to Mark and me, just to me. It was purchased with my inheritance and, according to my grandmother's will, must remain in my name only. Diane laughed, a short, dismissive sound. Don't be ridiculous, Mark. Would never— It's true, Mark interrupted, his voice strained. Elena showed me the deed. The house is in her name. A heavy silence fell over the table. Diane's face went through a rapid succession of expressions: disbelief, anger, calculation. Well, she finally said, her voice tight. That hardly matters. You're married. What's yours is Mark's. Actually, that's not how property law works in Oregon, I said calmly. As I'm sure you know from your real estate career, Diane. Walter cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss this another time. No, I think now is perfect, I said. Since you're living in my house, rearranging my furniture and using my resources without permission. I slid the rental agreement toward them. This outlines the terms of your 2-week stay. After that, you'll need to find other arrangements. 2 weeks? Diane sputtered. The condo won't be ready for at least a month. Then I suggest you look into hotel options, I replied. I've included a list of extended stay hotels that offer monthly rates. This is outrageous. Mark, are you going to let her speak to us this way? Mark looked torn, glancing between his parents and me. I held my breath, waiting. Mom, he finally said, Elena's right. We should have asked her before moving you in. It wasn't fair to spring this on her. Diane's face reddened. We're your parents. And Elena is my wife, and this is her house. He took a deep breath. We'll follow the terms of the agreement. The shock on Diane's face would have been comical if the situation weren't so tense. Walter, ever the accountant, was already reading through the document with careful attention. The terms seem reasonable, he said quietly, ignoring Diane's glare. 2 weeks, respect for private spaces, no financial impositions. Walter, Diane hissed. Diane, we're guests here, he said firmly, surprising all of us. We should act accordingly. I watched as something shifted in the room's dynamic. Walter, usually so passive, had drawn a line. Mark, torn between loyalty to his parents and respect for me, had chosen to stand with me. And Diane, for perhaps the first time since I'd known her, was speechless. Sign the agreement, I said, pushing a pen toward them. And we can all enjoy dinner. I've lost my appetite, Diane said coldly, standing up. If you'll excuse me. She left the room, her back rigid with indignation. Walter sighed, signed the document, and then followed her upstairs. Mark and I sat in silence for a long moment. I didn't know, he finally said, about the deed. You never asked, I replied, just like you never asked before moving them in, or transferring money, or letting your mother rearrange our home. I'm sorry. He reached for my hand across the table. I've been caught between you and them for so long, I guess I stopped seeing how unfair it was to you. It stops now, Mark. I mean it. The separation papers aren't a bluff. He nodded. Slowly. I know, and you're right. He squeezed my hand. This is your house. Our home. And from now on, we make decisions together. Including decisions about your parents, I added. Especially those. He glanced toward the stairs. 2 weeks? 2 weeks, I confirmed. And then they find somewhere else to stay until their condo is ready. Okay. He stood up, coming around to my side of the table. I should go talk to them. We should talk to them, I corrected him. Together. He nodded, taking my hand. As we headed upstairs to the guest room, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For 3 years, I'd tried to accommodate the Mitchell family rules. Now it was time for them to accommodate mine. The next 2 weeks were an exercise in boundary setting. Diane initially tried to test the limits of our agreement, accidentally wandering into my office with decorating suggestions or criticizing my vegetarian meals. But each time, Mark stepped in, firmly but kindly reinforcing our boundaries. Walter, surprisingly, became an ally of sorts. One evening, I found him stopping Diane from rearranging my kitchen cabinets. Diane, remember the agreement, he said quietly. This is Elena's kitchen. I'm just trying to make it more efficient, she protested. It's already efficient for Elena, he replied. That's what matters. I watched this exchange from the doorway, unseen by either of them. It was the first time I'd witnessed Walter standing up to Diane so directly, and I wondered what had prompted this change. My answer came the following morning, when Walter asked if he could join me for coffee before I started work. I owe you an apology, he said, once we were seated on the porch with our mugs. For years, I've enabled Diane's controlling tendencies, with Mark, with you, with everyone. I sipped my coffee, waiting for him to continue. After Diane's father lost everything in a bad investment, her mother took control of every aspect of their lives. Diane grew up believing that control equals security. He stared into his cup. I thought I was supporting her by letting her maintain that illusion. Instead, I've been helping her push away the people she loves. Including Mark, I said softly. He nodded. Especially Mark, and now you. He looked up, meeting my eyes. Directly. The house being in your name, it was a wake-up call, for both of us, I think. I didn't use it as leverage to hurt anyone, I said. I just needed to establish boundaries. I know. Walter smiled slightly. And I'm glad you did. Diane and I have been talking, really talking, for the first time in years. About our relationship, about our relationship with Mark, and about how we've treated you. And we've found a short-term rental. We're moving out tomorrow, not waiting for the full 2 weeks. I blinked in surprise. Walter, that's not necessary. As long as the boundaries are respected. It is necessary, he interrupted gently. For us as much as for you and Mark. We need to relearn how to stand on our own, not insert ourselves into our son's marriage. I felt an unexpected wave of emotion. Thank you. No, Walter said. Thank you for standing your ground, for loving our son enough to fight for your marriage, and for showing us that real family respects boundaries. The next day, Walter and Diane moved into their rental. Mark helped them settle in, coming home afterward with a mixture of relief and sadness on his face. They're really trying, he said, as we sat together on our sofa, now back in its original position. Mom actually apologized. I don't think I've ever heard her say I'm sorry before. People can change, I said, leaning against him, when they're given the proper motivation. He chuckled, wrapping his arm around me. Like discovering your daughter-in-law solely owns the house you've been trying to take over? Something like that. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the peace of our home. I am sorry, Mark said eventually, for not standing up for us sooner, for putting you in a position where you had to use legal documents to get my attention. I'm sorry it came to that too, I replied. But I'm not sorry for drawing the line. I don't want you to be. He kissed the top of my head. That strength is part of why I love you. 2 months later, Diane and Walter invited us to dinner at their newly renovated condo. I was apprehensive, but Mark assured me things had changed. He wasn't wrong. The Diane who greeted us was subdued, almost hesitant. The apartment was beautiful, but surprisingly, she gave me a tour without a single suggestion about how I might apply similar principles to our home. During dinner, Walter raised his glass. To new beginnings, he said, and to learning that family isn't about control, it's about respect. Diane met my eyes across the table. And to Elena, she added, quietly, for having the courage to teach us that lesson. I smiled, raising my glass in return. The house deed with my name alone hadn't just changed their attitude, it had transformed our entire family dynamic. For the first time since marrying Mark, I felt like we were truly partners, not just in our marriage, but in facing the world, including his parents, together. And as I looked around the table, seeing genuine smiles instead of strained politeness, I realized that sometimes the strongest foundations are built not on rules, but on boundaries respected and honored by all. The next morning, I woke to the smell of bacon frying and the clattering of pans. For a moment, I thought I was back in my childhood home, with my mother cooking breakfast. Then reality crashed in. Diane was in my kitchen, commandeering my morning. Routine. I pulled on my robe and stepped into the hallway, where I found Mark emerging from the shower, looking far too cheerful. Morning, he said, giving me a quick kiss. Mom's making her special breakfast casserole. The one with sausage. And 3 kinds of cheese? I asked, already knowing the answer. Yeah, your favorite. I sighed. Mark, I've been vegetarian for 5 years. It's not my favorite. His face fell slightly. Oh, right. I'm sure she can make you something else. That's not the point. I lowered my voice, aware that sound carried in our old craftsman home. The point is that she's taking over our space without consideration for how we actually live. She's just trying to help, Mark said, that familiar defensive tone creeping in. They're going through a rough time with the flood and everything. I understand that, but… Elena, Mark! Diane's voice cut through our conversation. Breakfast is ready. Mark squeezed my hand. Let's just enjoy breakfast. We can talk more later. But I knew later would never come. It never did when it came to discussions about his parents. In the kitchen, Diane had transformed my carefully organized space into something unrecognizable. My handcrafted ceramic bowls had been pushed to the back of the shelves, replaced by her heavy china plates. The special coffee beans I'd ordered from a local roaster had been replaced by a tin of Folgers. I hope you don't mind, Diane said, noticing me staring at the coffee pot. That fancy stuff you had was so bitter. This is much more palatable. I bit back a retort, reminding myself that this was temporary. Just a few weeks. I could endure anything for a few weeks. Walter sat at the kitchen island, newspaper spread out in front of him, looking completely at home. He nodded at me over his reading glasses. Morning, Elena. Hope we didn't wake you. Not at all, I lied, accepting the mug of coffee Diane handed me. I took a sip and tried not to grimace at the burned, over-extracted taste. I made my breakfast casserole, Diane announced proudly. Mark's absolute favorite growing up. He could eat half a pan himself. Looks great, Mom, Mark said, sliding onto a stool next to his father. But Elena's vegetarian, remember? Has been for years. Oh! Diane's hand flew to her chest. That's right. I completely forgot. How inconvenient. The way she said inconvenient made it sound like I'd chosen a vegetarian diet specifically to complicate her life. It's fine, I said, reaching for the fruit bowl. I'll just have some toast and fruit. The bread's in the freezer, Diane said. I noticed it was getting stale, so I moved it. Really, Elena, you should store it properly. Such waste otherwise. I closed my eyes briefly, counting to 5. The bread was fresh. I bought it yesterday. Well, it seemed stale to me, Diane insisted. Anyway, I've made a list of groceries we'll need. The refrigerator is practically empty. How do you manage? We manage just fine, I said, digging in the freezer for my now frozen artisan sourdough. I shop as we need things. That's so inefficient, Diane said, shaking her head. A proper weekly shopping trip with meal planning is much more economical. I glanced at Mark, hoping for some support, but he was happily digging into his casserole, seemingly oblivious to the tension. I have my own system, I said, forcing a smile. It works for us. Speaking of systems, Diane continued, I noticed your home office is quite chaotic. All those papers and models everywhere. How do you find anything? My office is organized according to my workflow, I said, my tone cooling. Please don't touch anything in there. I'm on a tight deadline for the Henderson project. Oh, the Henderson project. Diane's eyes lit up. Mark mentioned it last night. I actually know Janet Henderson from my real estate days. I took the liberty of calling her this morning to introduce myself as your mother-in-law. The toast I was buttering slipped from my fingers. You what? I just thought it would be nice for her to know you have family connections in real estate. I gave her some suggestions about the property development potential. She seemed very interested. My stomach dropped. The Henderson project was the largest commission I'd ever received, a complete renovation of a historic property. Janet Henderson was notoriously particular about her vision, and I'd spent months building trust with her. Diane, I said carefully, please don't contact my clients. The Henderson project is very delicate, and Janet has specific ideas about what she wants. And I simply offered a professional perspective, Diane replied, an edge to her voice. 30 years in Portland real estate gives me insights you might not have, dear. I looked to Mark again, silently pleading for him to step in. He cleared his throat. Mom, maybe let Elena handle her own clients, he suggested, though his tone was more questioning than assertive. I'm only trying to help, Diane said, her voice taking on that wounded quality that immediately made Mark backpedal. I know, Mom. Your experience is really valuable. But maybe check with Elena first next time? Of course, Diane agreed, though her tight smile told me she had no intention of doing so. Now, who wants more casserole? I excused myself to shower and dress, needing space to process what had just happened. As I stood under the hot water, I tried to calm my racing thoughts. I'd need to call Janet Henderson immediately. Damage control before Diane's helpfulness undermined months of work. When I emerged from the bathroom, I found Diane in my closet, sorting through my clothes. What are you doing? I asked, clutching my towel tighter around me. Just organizing a bit, she said, holding up one of my favorite architectural blazers. With distaste. You have some nice pieces hidden among all these. Creative choices. I thought I'd arrange them by color and occasion. Please don't, I said, taking the blazer from her hands. I have my own organization system. But it makes no sense, Diane protested. Business wear should be separate from casual. And honestly, Elena Some of these items should probably be donated. They don't exactly project a professional image. My clients hire me for my creative vision, not my wardrobe, I replied, trying to keep my voice even. Please respect my personal space. I'm just trying to help you present your best self, Diane said, that familiar hint of criticism in her tone. First impressions are so important in business. As Mark's wife, you represent the Mitchell family now. There it was, the real issue. I wasn't living up to Diane's standards of what a Mitchell woman should be. I represent myself, Diane, and my business is doing just fine without a wardrobe overhaul. I gestured toward the door. I need to get dressed now, for a client meeting. She left reluctantly, and I closed the door behind her, leaning against it for a moment to collect myself. This was only day 1 of their stay, and already my boundaries were being trampled. I dressed quickly in one of my unprofessional outfits, tailored black pants and the blazer Diane had criticized, and headed to my office, locking the door behind me. I needed to call Janet Henderson immediately. 3 rings, then her. Crisp voice answered. Elena, I was just about to call you. My heart sank. Janet, about my mother-in-law? She's quite forceful, isn't she? Janet interrupted. Called me at 7 this morning to discuss maximizing property values through a more conventional redesign. I am so sorry, I began, but Janet surprised me with a laugh. Don't be. I told her I specifically hired you because I didn't want conventional. That's why I was going to call you, to make sure you haven't changed your vision based on her input. Relief flooded through me. Absolutely not. The design remains exactly as we discussed. Good, because I love what you've proposed. The balance of historic preservation with modern functionality is exactly what I wanted. She paused. Though your mother-in-law seems to think I should be knocking down walls for an open concept and putting in granite countertops. I closed my eyes. Janet, I cannot apologize enough. She's staying with us temporarily and overstepped. It won't happen again. No need to apologize. Family can be challenging. Just stick to our vision and we'll be fine. After we hung up, I sat at my desk, trembling slightly from the close call. This could have cost me my biggest client. I needed to make it crystal clear to both Mark and Diane that my business was off limits. A knock at my office door interrupted my thoughts. Elena, Mark's voice. Can I come in? I unlocked the door, letting him in before closing it again. We need to talk. I know, he said, looking genuinely contrite. Mom told me she called your client. I had no idea she was going to do that. Mark, this can't happen again. The Henderson project is worth more than our mortgage payment for 6 months. If Janet had been offended... I know. He ran a hand through his hair. I'll talk to Mom. No, I said firmly. We'll talk to her. Together. This isn't just about my business. It's about respect for our home, our relationship, our boundaries. You're right, he agreed, though I could see the reluctance in his eyes. Confronting Diane was never easy. When do you want to do this? Tonight. After dinner. And speaking of dinner, I'll be cooking. Vegetarian pasta that everyone can eat. Mom was planning to make her pot roast. In my kitchen, I'll be cooking tonight, I insisted. We need to establish some ground rules, Mark, before things get worse. He nodded slowly. Okay, you're right. I'll back you up. But I'd heard that promise before, and it rarely materialized when we were actually facing his mother. I spent the rest of the morning working, trying to focus on the Henderson plans despite the occasional sound of furniture being moved around the house. Around noon, I emerged from my office to find Diane had rearranged the living room again, this time pushing my antique writing desk against a wall to make room for a large recliner I'd never seen before. Where did that come from? I asked, pointing at the recliner. Walter's back has been bothering him and your sofa is too soft, Diane explained. We had this in storage. Mark helped us pick it up this morning while you were working. I looked around for Mark, but he was nowhere to be seen. Where is he now? He went to the hardware store. We need some proper picture hooks. I thought family photos would warm up this wall. She gestured to the gallery wall where I'd carefully arranged prints by local artists. Those are original artworks, I said. They're staying where they are. Diane's smile tightened. Elena, dear, a home should reflect family history. These abstract things don't say anything about who you are. They say plenty about who I am, I countered. They're by local Portland artists whose work I admire. They inspire me. Well, they're rather cold if you ask me, not very welcoming. I was saved from responding by my phone ringing. It was Zoe. Can you meet for coffee? I asked without preamble. That bad already? She replied. Worse. The client call, the rearranged living room, the frozen bread. I need to vent before I explode. Bridgetown Brews, 20 minutes. I grabbed my laptop bag. I need to meet a colleague, I told Diane. I'll be back later. But what about lunch? I was going to make sandwiches. I'll eat out. I was already heading for the door. Oh, and Elena, she called after me. While you're out, could you pick up some proper coffee? That local stuff you buy is dreadful. I didn't answer, just closed the door behind me and took a deep breath of the crisp Portland air. Freedom, even temporarily, felt wonderful. Zoe was waiting with coffee and a sympathetic ear. I unloaded everything that had happened since our meeting the previous day. She called your client? Zoe's legal mind immediately identified the most serious transgression. That crosses from annoying to potentially damaging your livelihood. Janet was understanding, thankfully. But what if she hadn't been? I wrapped my hands around my mug. And it's only going to get worse. Diane's already redecorating, rearranging, reorganizing everything she can get her hands on. And Mark? Says he'll back me up, but he always caves when Diane turns on the guilt. You should have seen him this morning, pretending not to notice the tension over breakfast. I sighed. I love him, Zoe, but sometimes I wonder if he'll ever truly prioritize our marriage over his parents' expectations. Have you looked at the deed like we discussed? Yes. It's definitely only in my name. The inheritance stipulation is very clear in my grandmother's will. Any property purchased with her money remains solely in my name. And Mark never read the paperwork? He was so busy with that promotion when we bought the house. He just signed where the lawyer pointed. I took a sip of coffee. I never thought I'd need to use it as leverage. It feels manipulative. It's not manipulative to assert your legal rights, Zoe said, her attorney voice taking over. Especially when your in-laws are the ones manipulating the situation. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Where are you? Mom's made lunch. I showed it to Zoe. Notice how he doesn't ask if you're okay or need anything, she observed. Just concerned that you're not there for his mother's lunch. To be fair, he doesn't know how upset I am. Because he's not paying attention, Zoe pointed out. Look, Elena, I know you love Mark, but this pattern with his parents isn't new. It's been going on for 3 years, and it's getting worse, not better. I know. I stared into my coffee. That's why we're having a family meeting tonight. Setting clear boundaries. And if they don't respect those boundaries, then I'll have to make some difficult decisions. Before I could elaborate, my phone lit up with a notification from our banking app. I opened it, my stomach dropping. He just transferred another $1,500 to his parents, I said, turning the phone. To show Zoe. That's $3,500 in 2 days. For what? I have no idea. I scrolled through our transaction history, feeling sick. There's another one from last week I didn't notice. $1,000 to Walter's account. Elena, this isn't just about boundaries anymore. This is financial abuse. That's a strong term, is it? He's making significant financial decisions without consulting you, transferring large sums to his parents without discussion. How is that not financial abuse? I started typing a message to Mark, then deleted it. This isn't a conversation for text. We need to talk in person. What are you going to do? I gathered my things, a plan forming. First, I'm going to the bank to protect what's left of our savings. Then I'm going to call Ben Rodriguez. The real estate attorney? Yes. I need to understand exactly what my options are, legally. You're not thinking of divorce, are you? Zoe looked concerned. No, at least I hope not. But I need to be prepared for all possibilities. I stood up. Can you recommend a good family lawyer, just in case? Megan Cho, she's tough but fair. Zoe scribbled a name and number on a napkin. But Elena, are you sure you want to escalate this so quickly? I'm not escalating. I'm protecting myself. I tucked the napkin into my pocket. 3 years, Zoe. 3 years of trying to set boundaries with Diane, of asking Mark to stand up to his parents. Nothing's changed. In fact, it's gotten worse. And the deed? When will you tell them about that? Tonight, after I've secured our finances. The local branch of our bank was quiet when I arrived. I'd called ahead and asked to speak with a personal banker, explaining the situation in vague terms. Joanne, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, met me in a private office. Mrs. Mitchell, what can I help you with today? I need to secure my personal finances, I said, cutting to the chase. My husband has been making large transfers to his parents without my knowledge or consent. If Joanne was surprised, she didn't show it. I see. Are these joint accounts? Yes, but the majority of the deposits come from my architecture business. And our house was purchased with my inheritance, which legally remains solely mine. Joanne nodded. There are several options we can discuss. First, I'd recommend opening a separate account in your name only for future earnings. For existing joint accounts, we can add withdrawal limits or dual authorization requirements. For the next hour, we reviewed options and set up safeguards. By the time I left, I had a new personal account, transfer limits on our joint accounts, and notification settings that would alert me to any unusual activity. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it would prevent any more large sums disappearing, without my knowledge. My next stop was Ben Rodriguez's office. As the attorney who had handled our home purchase, he was familiar with the inheritance stipulations and the deed. The house is definitely solely in your name, Ben confirmed, reviewing the documents. Your grandmother's will was very specific about properties purchased with her funds. And legally, what does that mean in terms of my rights? It means you have sole discretion over who lives there, any modifications to the property, and so forth. He looked at me over his reading glasses. Is there a specific concern I should know about? I explained the situation with Mark's parents, the boundary violations, and the financial transfers. I see, Ben said when I'd finished. And you're wondering about your options if the situation doesn't improve? Yes, I don't want a divorce. I love Mark, but I need leverage to establish clear boundaries with his parents. A rental agreement might be a good start, Ben suggested. Something formal that outlines expectations for their stay, duration, shared spaces, financial contributions, and so forth. You think they'll sign it? If they understand the alternative is finding other accommodations immediately, yes. He started typing on his computer. I can draft something straightforward. 2 weeks should be sufficient time for them to find alternative arrangements. 2 weeks, I repeated. It sounded blissfully short compared to the open-ended few weeks Diane had mentioned. And as a backup, Ben continued, I can prepare separation papers. not to file, but to demonstrate the seriousness of the situation if needed. The phrase separation papers made my stomach clench, but I nodded. Yes, as a last resort. By the time I left Ben's office, with promises to email the documents within the hour, it was nearly 4 o'clock. Mark had texted 3 more times, each message increasingly concerned. Where are you? Mom's worried. Are you okay? Elena, please call me. We're all worried. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to the grocery store, selecting ingredients for dinner. Fresh pasta, vegetables, herbs for a sauce that even Diane couldn't criticize. If we were going to have a difficult conversation, at least we'd do it over a meal I'd prepared in my own kitchen. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw Walter outside, washing what appeared to be Mark's car. He waved as I parked, his expression cautious. Elena, good to see you. Everything all right? Mark's been trying to reach you. I've been taking care of some business, I said, opening the trunk to retrieve my groceries. Is he home? In the backyard with Diane. She's been suggesting some landscaping changes. That Japanese maple you have isn't in an optimal location for growth. Walter took some of the grocery bags from me. She means well, you know. Does she? I looked at him directly. Or does she just need to control everything around her? Walter's eyes dropped. It's her way of showing she cares. No, Walter. It's her way of asserting dominance. And it stops today. I walked into my home purchased with my inheritance, designed to my specifications, feeling a new resolve. The documents from Ben were in my email. The bank. Accounts were secured. I had facts and legal standing on my side. In the kitchen, I found evidence of Diane's continued reorganization. My spice rack had been completely rearranged, alphabetically rather than by frequency of use. The cookbooks I kept on the counter were now lined up on a high shelf, replaced by a ceramic rooster I'd never seen before. I set the groceries down and began unpacking, moving my cookbooks back to their proper place. Tonight would be challenging. Mark would be caught between loyalties. Diane would resist. Walter would try to keep the peace. But for the first time in 3 years, I felt prepared to stand my ground. This was my home. My life. And it was time. Everyone remembered that. My phone buzzed with an email notification. The documents from Ben had arrived. I opened the attachment, scanning the rental agreement. 2 weeks. Clear boundaries. Consequences for violations. Then I opened the second attachment. Separation papers. A last resort I prayed I wouldn't need to use. Outside, I could hear Mark and Diane discussing something about the garden. His voice carried that eager-to-please tone he always used with his mother. Soon they would come inside. Soon we would have our confrontation. I took a deep breath and began preparing dinner. Whatever happened next, I was ready. As I carried dishes to the sink, I felt a weight lifting. The confrontation I'd dreaded for so long was over, and while the outcome wasn't perfect, it was a start. Mark had finally stood with me against his parents, even if just a little. The rental agreement was signed. 2 weeks suddenly seemed manageable. Let me help with those, Walter offered, gathering remaining plates from the table. Diane remained seated, her posture stiff with indignation. Mark looked exhausted, the separation papers still sitting in front of him like a physical manifestation of how close we'd come to the edge. Thank you, Walter, I said, accepting his help. We worked in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the clinking of dishes and running water. From the dining room, I could hear Mark speaking quietly to his mother, his tone firmer than I'd ever heard him use with her. I'm sorry about the client call, Walter said suddenly, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Diane shouldn't have done that. I glanced at him, surprised by the direct acknowledgement. No, she shouldn't have. She's always been controlling, even before we lost everything in the market crash 10 years ago. He handed me a rinsed plate. After that, it got worse. As if controlling every little thing around her could prevent another disaster. That doesn't make it acceptable, I said, loading the dishwasher. No, it doesn't. Walter sighed. I enabled it for too long. With Diane, with Mark, even with you. I stopped what I was doing, turning to look at him directly. Why the change of heart now? He smiled sadly. Because I recognize the look in your eyes. My first wife had that same look before she left me. You were married before? Briefly, in my 20s, before Diane. He leaned against the counter. Margaret couldn't tolerate my mother's constant interference. I didn't stand up for her, and eventually, she stopped giving me chances to do so. The parallel wasn't lost on me. And you think Mark is making the same mistake? I know he is. Walter's eyes held genuine regret. And I've been helping him make it, just like my father helped me destroy my first marriage. It's a family pattern I don't want to see repeated. Before I could respond, Mark appeared in the kitchen doorway. Mom's going to bed, he said, his expression unreadable. She says she needs time to process everything. That's probably best, Walter replied. I'll check on her in a bit. An awkward silence fell. So many things needed to be said between Mark and me, but not with Walter present. I should head up too, Walter said, sensing the tension. Thank you for dinner, Elena, and for the clarity. Once Walter had gone upstairs, Mark and I stood in the kitchen, the space between us feeling wider than the few feet that physically separated us. You really went to a lawyer, he finally said, not quite a question. Yes. I leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. I needed to understand my options. Options for leaving me. His voice was flat. Options for protecting myself, I corrected. There's a difference. Is there? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were ready to throw away our marriage over one disagreement. One disagreement? I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. Mark, this isn't about your parents staying with us. It's about 3 years of watching you consistently prioritize their needs, their opinions, their comfort over our relationship. It's about you making significant financial decisions without consulting me. It's about you allowing them to invade every aspect of our lives without permission. They're my parents, Elena. And I'm your wife, the person you promised to build a life with. But every time there's a conflict between what they want and what I need, you choose them. He started to protest, then stopped, the truth of my words sinking in. I didn't see it that way. I know. I softened my tone. You love them. You want to help them. That's one of the things I've always admired about you. Your loyalty, your generosity. But there has to be balance, and there have to be boundaries. Mark moved to the kitchen table, sinking into a chair. The house really is only in your name? Yes, my grandmother's will was very specific. Why didn't you tell me before? I joined him at the table. It never seemed relevant. We've always treated the house as ours, not just mine. I never thought I'd need to use it as leverage. Leverage. He repeated the word, testing its weight. Is that what tonight was about? Leveraging your legal ownership to get your way? No, I said firmly. Tonight was about finally being heard, about establishing boundaries that should have existed all along. By threatening to separate if I didn't agree. By showing you how serious this is for me. I reached for his hand. Mark, I don't want to separate. I love you, but I can't keep living like this, always bending until I break to accommodate your parents' needs and expectations. He was quiet for a long moment, stroking my palm with his thumb. I never meant to make you feel second best, he finally said. or to disregard your feelings. I never learned how to say no to them, especially after they lost everything in the crash. I understand that. But their financial problems aren't ours to solve at the expense of our own security. Dad's medical bills were legitimate, he said defensively. The heart medication isn't covered by their insurance. I blinked in surprise. Walter has heart problems? Yes, for about a year now. Why didn't you tell me? We could have discussed how to help them. Because... He trailed off, looking ashamed. Because Mom asked me not to. She said you'd use it as an excuse to limit their access to our resources. The casual cruelty of Diane's assumptions stung. I would never withhold help for legitimate medical needs, but I deserved to know where our money was going. You're right. Mark sighed heavily. I should have told you. I should have stood up to Mom when she asked me to keep it secret. Yes, you should have. I squeezed his hand. Partners share burdens, Mark. They don't hide them. He nodded, slowly. The separation papers? Are they real? Yes. Ben drafted them as a contingency. Would you have used them? If I hadn't agreed tonight. I met his eyes steadily. I hope it wouldn't have come to that, but yes, if necessary. The truth hung between us, heavy with implication. For the first time, Mark seemed to truly grasp how close we'd come to the breaking point. I don't want to lose you, he whispered. Then help me fix this. Not just tonight, but moving forward. Real change. Starting with the 2-week timeline for my parents? Yes. They need to find their own space, and we need time to rebuild our foundation without their daily influence. He nodded slowly. Okay, 2 weeks. And no more secret financial transfers. Agreed. And my office remains off limits. Of course. We continued like this, outlining clear boundaries that Mark committed to enforcing. With each agreement, the knot in my chest loosened slightly. It wasn't perfect. There would be challenges ahead, especially with Diane. But it was a start. Finally, exhausted from the emotional evening, we headed upstairs. As we passed the guest room, I could hear Diane's voice, sharp with indignation. It's outrageous, Walter. Absolutely outrageous. As if we're some kind of unwelcome strangers, instead of family. Walter's response was too low to hear, but it didn't seem to mollify Diane. I don't care what you think we should have done differently. No daughter-in-law should have that kind of power. And using the house as leverage, it's manipulative. Mark tensed beside me. I placed a hand on his arm, urging him to keep walking. This wasn't a battle for tonight. In our bedroom, with the door firmly closed, Mark looked troubled. Mom's really upset. I know, but her feelings don't change what needs to happen. She's never going to forgive this. Maybe not immediately. But eventually, she'll need to accept that our marriage has boundaries. I began changing for bed, bone-tired. And if she doesn't, that's her choice. But I won't compromise on this, Mark. Not anymore. He nodded slowly, acceptance gradually replacing the conflict in his expression. I'm with you, he said finally. Whatever happens next, I'm with you. Those words, so simple yet so meaningful after years of feeling second best, brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. We fell asleep holding hands, the separation papers forgotten downstairs. A possibility, but not an inevitability. Morning arrived with unexpected quiet. No sounds of Diane rearranging furniture or Walter making coffee. For a moment, I wondered if they had left in the night, unable to accept the new boundaries. Mark stirred beside me. What time is it? Almost 8. I sat up, listening. It's quiet. Too quiet. He yawned, stretching. Mom's usually up at 6, cleaning or cooking or something. Maybe they're sleeping in. But even as I said it, I knew it was unlikely. Diane Mitchell didn't sleep in. We dressed quickly and headed downstairs. The kitchen was pristine, untouched since we'd cleaned up after dinner. No coffee brewing, no breakfast preparations. Maybe they went out for breakfast? Mark suggested. A note on the counter caught my eye. Mark, read in Diane's precise handwriting. We've gone to view some extended stay options. No need to wait for us. We'll be back this afternoon to discuss arrangements. Mom and Dad. I handed it to Mark, surprised. They're actually looking at alternatives. He read it twice, as if trying to decipher some hidden message. That's unexpected. Maybe they're taking the agreement seriously after all. Or maybe they're looking for leverage of their own. Mark set the note down. Mom doesn't give up control easily. The thought had occurred to me as well, but I pushed it aside. Let's focus on the positive. They're at least considering other options. We made coffee and breakfast, enjoying the rare morning of peace in our own kitchen. Mark seemed lighter somehow, as if the previous night's confrontation had lifted a weight from him as well. We talked about ordinary things, work projects, the upcoming weekend, a movie we wanted to see, without the shadow of his parents' expectations hanging over us. After breakfast, I headed to my office. The Henderson project deadline was approaching, and I needed to finalize some details. To my relief, everything was exactly as I'd left it. Diane's organizational impulses apparently thwarted by our new boundaries. I lost myself in work, the familiar flow of design problems and solutions helping to clear my mind of family drama. Around noon, Mark knocked on my office door. Lunch break? He asked, holding up sandwiches and fruit. We ate in the backyard, enjoying the unseasonably warm Portland day. For the first time in months, our conversation flowed easily, without the undercurrent of tension that had become so familiar I'd almost stopped noticing it. I forgot how nice this is, Mark said, leaning back in his chair. Just us. Me too. I watched a hummingbird dart around our flowering shrubs. Do you think they'll find something today? Probably. Dad seemed pretty determined. He hesitated. I called him this morning. He said they're looking at an extended stay place near their condo. It's expensive, but they can afford it. With the money you've been sending them? Mark had the grace to look embarrassed. Partly, yes. But Dad also admitted they have more savings than they've let on. Mom just doesn't like spending it. Of course she doesn't. I tried to keep the bitterness from my voice. Why spend their money when they can spend ours? It's not like that, Mark began, then stopped. Actually, maybe it is like that. Sometimes. Dad said they need to be more self-sufficient. Walter said that? My surprise was genuine. Walter had always deferred to Diane on financial matters. Yeah, he seemed different, more assertive. Mark looked thoughtful. After you went to bed last night, he came to talk to me. Said some things about his first marriage, about patterns repeating. He mentioned that to me too. He told me he regrets not standing up to his mother for his first wife's sake. Said he doesn't want me to make the same mistake. Mark met my eyes. He's worried about us, Elena. Really worried. Maybe this situation is a wake-up call for all of us. Mark nodded slowly. Maybe. He checked his watch. They should be back soon. Are you ready for round 2? As ready as I'll ever be. I gathered our lunch things. But this time, we're united. Absolutely, Mark agreed, pressing a kiss to my forehead. No more divided loyalties. We cleaned up from lunch and settled in the living room to wait, both of us pretending to read while actually watching the clock. When we finally heard a car in the driveway, the tension that had briefly lifted returned full force. Walter entered, first looking tired but resolute. Diane followed, her expression unreadable. They sat across from us, an unexpected formality to their posture. How did it go? Mark asked, breaking the silence. We found a place, Walter answered. The Oakwood extended stay. It's a bit pricey, but they had a monthly room available immediately. That's good, I said cautiously. When would you move in? Tomorrow, Walter replied, surprising us both. We've already put down the deposit. Tomorrow? Mark looked between his parents. That's fast. We thought it best, Walter continued. For everyone. Diane had yet to speak, her lips pressed into a thin line. Whatever conversation had occurred between them, it clearly hadn't left her happy. Mom, are you okay with this arrangement? Mark asked. Do I have a choice? She replied, her voice tight. The rental agreement your wife had drawn up made the situation quite clear. Diane, Walter said, a warning in his tone. She sighed, visibly gathering herself. Yes, I'm okay with it. The Oakwood is adequate, and it's only for a few weeks until our condo is ready. That's good, Mark said cautiously. We appreciate you both being so understanding. Diane's laugh held no humor. Understanding, is that what we're calling it? Being evicted from our son's home? No one is being evicted, I said calmly. The agreement is for 2 weeks. You've chosen to leave sooner. After making it abundantly clear we weren't welcome. Diane, that's enough, Walter said firmly. We discussed this on the drive back. Elena and Mark have every right to set boundaries in their home. Their home, she repeated bitterly, which apparently isn't actually Mark's at all. The deed doesn't change our marriage, Mark said. Or our partnership. Doesn't it? Diane looked at him sharply. She waited until she had leverage, then sprang it on you. How is that partnership? I felt my temper rising but forced myself to remain calm. I didn't wait for anything. The house has always been in my name, and it never mattered until boundaries needed to be established. Convenient timing, Diane muttered. Mom, stop. Mark's voice held an authority I'd rarely heard him use with his mother. Elena is my wife. This is our home, regardless of whose name is on the deed, and we've made a decision about how long guests can stay. Guests. The word seemed to wound Diane. So that's what we are now, not family. Guests. Family respects boundaries, I said quietly, and asks permission before making changes to someone else's home. Diane opened her mouth to retort, but Walter placed a hand on her arm. Diane, please, this isn't helping. She fell silent, though the anger still radiated from her. Walter turned to us, his expression apologetic. We'll be out by tomorrow afternoon, he said, and we've made arrangements for our things in storage to be delivered directly to the condo once the repairs are complete. Thank you, I said sincerely. And for what it's worth, you're both still welcome to visit. Just as visitors, not residents. Diane stood abruptly. I need to start packing. She left the room without another word, her back rigid with indignation. Walter sighed heavily. Give her time. This has been difficult for her to accept. And for you? Mark asked quietly. For me? Walter considered the question. It's been clarifying. Sometimes we need a mirror held up to our behavior. He looked at me with genuine remorse. I'm sorry, Elena, for everything. Thank you, Walter. His apology meant more than I expected. He stood, preparing to follow his wife upstairs. I should help her pack, and maybe calm her down a bit. She'll adjust eventually. Once we were alone, Mark slumped back against the sofa. Well, that went better than I expected. Really? Your mother can barely look at me. Trust me, this is restrained for her. She's not throwing things or making threats. Is that something she does? I asked, alarmed. Not physically throwing. Things, but emotionally? Yes. He rubbed his eyes tiredly. When Dad's business failed and they lost the house, she didn't speak to their financial advisor for 2 years. Literally would not acknowledge his existence, even when they ran into him at events. And you think she'll do that to me now? Maybe. For a while. He took my hand. Does that bother you? I considered the question honestly. Not as much as it probably should. I'm more concerned about how it will affect you. I'll manage. He squeezed my fingers. I've been trying to earn my mother's approval my entire life. Maybe it's time to stop trying so hard. The maturity in his response surprised and moved me. I never wanted to come between you and your parents. You didn't. Their behavior did. He pulled me closer. And maybe this is long overdue. For all of us. Upstairs, we could hear Diane's voice raised in agitation, though the words were indistinct. Walter's deeper tones responded, calmer but firm. They're really leaving tomorrow, I said, still hardly believing it. Looks that way. Mark seemed equally surprised. Dad's influence, I'm guessing. I've never seen him stand up to Mom like this before. People can surprise you. They can indeed. Mark smiled slightly. Like my wife, going to a lawyer and the bank in one day, completely transforming the power dynamic in our family. I didn't enjoy doing it, I admitted. The separation papers especially? I know. But I needed the wake-up call. He kissed my hand. I'm just glad you cared enough to fight for us instead of just walking away. I'll always fight for us, I promised, as long as we're both in the ring. The rest of the day passed in a strange limbo. Diane remained upstairs, packing and periodically making phone calls in which she could be heard recounting her version of events to various relatives. Walter made several trips to their car with suitcases and boxes, politely declining our offers of help. Mark alternated between helping his father and checking on his mother, caught in the middle despite our new unity. I kept to my office, giving them space while trying to focus on work rather than the domestic drama unfolding in my home. Around dinner time, Walter knocked on my office door. Elena, do you have a moment? Of course. I saved my work and gestured to the chair opposite my desk. Everything okay? As okay as can be expected. He settled into the chair with a sigh. Diane's sister is on the warpath. Apparently, we're being cruelly evicted, and you're a manipulative gold digger. I winced. That's going to make family gatherings awkward. Diane has always had a flair for dramatic retellings. Walter smiled ruefully. But that's not why I wanted to speak with you. Oh? I wanted to apologize properly for my role in all of this. He looked genuinely contrite. When we lost everything in the crash, I withdrew. Let Diane take control because I felt like such a failure. And over time, that became our pattern. She controls, I enable, and everyone around us suffers the consequences. Including Mark, I said softly. Especially Mark. We taught him that love means having no boundaries. That family can demand anything. Walter shook his head sadly. It was wrong, and watching him nearly lose you because of lessons we taught him. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Thank you for that. I meant it sincerely. Your support made a difference last night. Too little, too late, perhaps, but better than never. He hesitated. There's something else you should know. About the money Mark has been sending us. My guard instantly went up. What about it? It wasn't just for my heart medication, though that was part of it. Walter looked ashamed. Diane's been investing it in a new business venture, a franchise. Opportunity she believes will restore our financial standing. Without telling Mark? She convinced him it was for medical expenses and living costs. He never questioned it because he never questions his mother. Walter sighed heavily. I enabled it as usual, but after last night I realized we can't keep doing this. Using Mark as our personal ATM, risking his marriage for our schemes. I absorbed this. New information, anger rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Does Mark know yet? I told him this morning. It's partly why Diane is so upset. She feels I've betrayed her by confessing. And the franchise opportunity? Is it legitimate? Walter's hesitation told me everything. It's high risk, similar to the investment that cost us everything 10 years ago. So you were using our money Mark transferred without my knowledge, to fund another potential financial disaster? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Yes. Walter didn't try to justify it. And I'm deeply ashamed of that. Which is why I've pulled us out of the deal and returned what funds hadn't been committed yet. It's being transferred back to your account today. How much? About $2,000. The rest. He trailed off. Is gone, I finished for him. Yes. For what it's worth, I've also made arrangements to repay the full amount in installments from my pension. I studied his face, looking for signs of deception, but saw only genuine remorse. Does Diane know you've done this? Yes. It was our primary argument this morning. She feels I've undermined her chance to restore our financial security. And what do you think? Walter smiled sadly. I think at 65, it's time to accept that we're not going to be wealthy again. That our son's marriage is more important than Diane's schemes to reclaim our former lifestyle. He stood up. The money will be in your account by tomorrow. And you have my word that we won't ask Mark for financial help again. Thank you, Walter. I stood as well. For your honesty and for taking responsibility. It's long overdue. He moved to the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Elena, you're the best thing that ever happened to my son. I hope someday Diane will see that too. After he left, I sat at my desk, processing our conversation. The financial deception went deeper than I'd suspected, but Walter's willingness to admit it and make amends seemed genuine. Whether Diane would ever reach the same conclusion remained to be seen. My phone buzzed with a bank notification. $2,183. 47 had been deposited into our account with the description, Repayment, Walter Mitchell. He hadn't waited until tomorrow after all. I found Mark in the kitchen, staring blankly into the refrigerator. Your dad just returned some money to our account, I said, showing him the notification. He said he would. Mark closed the refrigerator, without taking anything. He told me everything this morning, about the franchise, the lies about medical bills, all of it. How do you feel about that? Angry, betrayed. He leaned against the counter. And guilty, because I should have questioned it more. Should have told you from the beginning. Yes, you should have. I didn't sugarcoat it. But what matters now is what we do going forward. Dad says they won't ask for money again. Do you believe him? Mark considered the question. I believe he means it. Mom, is another story. Then we maintain our boundaries. Together. He nodded, pulling me into a hug. Together. We stood like that for a long moment, drawing strength from each other. Whatever came next, at least we were facing it as a united front. What do you want to do about dinner? Mark finally asked. I don't think Mom will come down. I can make something simple, or we could order in. Let's order in. I don't have the energy to cook, and you've done enough. We decided. On Thai food, our favorite comfort meal. While waiting for delivery, we sat in the backyard, watching the evening light filter through the trees. Despite the tension still lingering in the house, there was an undercurrent of relief. Tomorrow, our home would be ours again. What do you think happens next? I asked. With your parents, I mean. Honestly, I'm not sure. Dad seems genuinely remorseful and determined to change. Mom, he sighed. Mom will hold a grudge. For how long, I don't know. And you'll be caught in the middle. Maybe, but this time I know where I stand. He took my hand. With you, no matter what. The conviction in his voice warmed me. It had taken a near disaster to get here, but for the first time in our marriage, I truly believed he meant it. I never thought it would come to separation papers, he said quietly. Neither did I. But I was running out of options, Mark. Every conversation about boundaries with your parents led nowhere. Every agreement was temporary at best. I know, and that's on me. He turned to face me fully. I let it happen. Let them steamroll over our life together because it was easier than standing up to them. And now? Now I understand what's at stake. He squeezed my hand. And I won't risk losing you again. Our food arrived, and we ate in the kitchen, deliberately casual, as if it were any normal evening. Upstairs, Diane remained sequestered in the guest room. Walter came down briefly to make her a plate, his expression weary but resolved. "She'll come around," he said, though whether he was trying to convince us or himself wasn't clear. "Just needs time." After dinner, Mark and I retired to the living room, deliberately reclaiming the space that had been so thoroughly disrupted by Diane's rearranging. We moved the furniture back to our preferred arrangement, a small but significant act of restoration. "It already feels more like home again," Mark observed, settling onto the sofa. "Just wait until they're actually gone," I replied, only half joking. We spent the evening in quiet companionship, reading and occasionally sharing thoughts, the comfort of normal routine gradually returning. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Diane's departure would undoubtedly be fraught with emotion and possibly more conflict. But for tonight, at least, we had peace. As we prepared for bed, I noticed Mark staring at the separation papers, still lying on his bedside table, where he'd placed them after bringing them upstairs. "We can tear those up," I suggested. He picked them up, weighing them in his hand. "Not yet," he said finally. "Let's keep them as a reminder of how close we came to losing everything and what we're fighting to protect." I nodded, understanding the sentiment. Sometimes we needed physical reminders of our most important lessons. "Besides," he added with a small smile, "you spent good money on lawyer fees. Might as well get some use out of them. As a paperweight? As a symbol of boundaries, of consequences." He set the papers back down. "And of how much I love you. Enough to face down my mother and win." I laughed, the tension of the day finally breaking. "When you put it that way." He pulled me into his arms, resting his forehead against mine. "Thank you for fighting for us," he whispered, "for not giving up when it would have been easier to walk away." "Our life together is worth fighting for," I replied simply. And as we held each other in the quiet of our bedroom, I knew it was true. Whatever came next with the Mitchells, whatever challenges we faced, we would face them together. The battle for boundaries had been painful but necessary and ultimately healing. Tomorrow our home would be truly ours again. And perhaps in time, we could rebuild a healthier relationship with Mark's parents. One based on mutual respect rather than control and acquiescence. For tonight, though, it was enough to know we'd turned a corner. The house deed with my name alone had indeed changed everything, not by giving me power over Mark, but by giving us both the clarity to see what truly mattered. Each other. Morning arrived with a tense, expectant energy permeating the house. I woke early, before Mark, and spent a quiet moment watching the soft light filter through our bedroom curtains. Today, Walter and Diane would leave. Today, our home would become ours again. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Mark, and padded downstairs. To my surprise, Walter was already in the kitchen, coffee brewing. "Couldn't sleep," he explained, offering me a cup. "Too much on my mind." "Thank you." I accepted the coffee, noting he'd used my special beans, not Diane's. Folgers, a small but meaningful gesture. "Is Diane up yet?" "No, she took a sleeping pill last night." He sighed, leaning against the counter. "This isn't easy for her, Elena. Losing control never is. I know, but it's necessary. Yes, it is. He gazed out the window at our backyard, expression thoughtful. I've been enabling her behavior for decades, watching her push away friends, family, colleagues with her need to control everything and everyone. I told myself I was supporting her, but really, I was just avoiding conflict. I sipped my coffee, unsure how to respond to this unexpected candor. Did Mark ever tell you about his sister? Walter asked suddenly. Beth? Only that she lives in Chicago and they're not very close. There's a reason for that distance. Walter's expression grew sad. Beth married young, against Diane's wishes, chose love over the prestigious career her mother had planned for her. Diane never forgave her for that defiance. That seems extreme. It is, and I let it happen. Stood by while Diane systematically cut Beth from our lives. Walter's voice held deep regret. We haven't seen our grandchildren in 3 years because Diane refuses to visit Beth's home, and Beth refuses to subject her family to Diane's criticism. I didn't know. Mark doesn't talk about it. It's easier for him to pretend everything's fine, to be the good son who stays close and follows the rules. Walter looked at me directly. Until you came along and showed him there's another way to live. The weight of his words settled between us. I never intended to cause a family rift. You didn't. The rift was already there, papered over, with denial and accommodation. He smiled sadly. You just had the courage to stop accommodating. Something I should have done years ago. Footsteps on the stairs interrupted our conversation. Mark appeared, hair rumpled from sleep. Morning, he mumbled, making a beeline for the coffee. Everyone sleep okay? Walter and I exchanged a glance. Our deeper conversation shelved for now. Well enough, Walter replied. Your mother's still asleep. When do you think you'll head out? Mark asked, trying for casual but not quite succeeding. Around noon, I expect. Once Diane is up and ready, Walter checked his watch. I should go finish packing. After he left, Mark looked at me questioningly. Everything okay? You two seemed deep in conversation. Your dad was just sharing some thoughts. I hesitated, unsure how much to relay. He mentioned Beth. Mark's expression closed slightly. Oh, what about her? Just that there's distance there, because of Diane's controlling behavior. That's one perspective, Mark said, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. What's yours? He shrugged, looking uncomfortable. Beth made choices Mom didn't agree with. It created tension. Enough tension that you rarely see your sister or your niece and nephew? It's complicated, Elena. Mark's tone suggested he didn't want to pursue this line of conversation. I decided not to push. We'd had enough confrontation in the past. 2 days, and today would bring its own challenges when Diane finally emerged. We ate breakfast quietly, each lost in thought. Around 9, we heard movement upstairs. Diane was awake. I should check on her, Mark said, standing. Make sure she has everything she needs. While he was gone, I tidied the kitchen and tried to focus on the day ahead. Once the Mitchells left, Mark and I would need time to reconnect, to strengthen our new understanding. But I also had work deadlines looming, particularly the Henderson project. I was reviewing emails on my tablet when Diane finally appeared downstairs, Mark trailing behind her. She looked pale but composed, her chin held high with practiced dignity. Good morning, Diane, I said, aiming for polite neutrality. Coffee? No, thank you. Her tone was icy. I've had some upstairs. An awkward silence fell. Walter joined us a moment later, carrying a small suitcase. That's the last of it, I think, he said. The car's mostly packed. Already? Mark looked surprised. I thought you weren't leaving until noon. We found an earlier check-in time. At the Oakwood, Walter explained. Seemed sensible to get settled as soon as possible. Diane's lips thinned with displeasure, suggesting this accelerated timeline wasn't her preference. Yes, very sensible, since we're clearly unwelcome here. Mom? Mark began, but Walter interrupted smoothly. We're grateful for the time we had here, he said firmly. And we understand that everyone needs their own space. Diane made a small, dismissive sound but didn't contradict him. Progress, of a sort. Can I help carry anything to the car? I offered. No need, Walter replied. Everything's ready except this last bag. We can manage. More awkward silence followed. I glanced at Mark, who looked torn between relief that they were leaving and guilt over the circumstances. Well, Diane finally said, her voice brittle, I suppose this is goodbye then. It doesn't have to be goodbye, I said carefully. Just goodbye to living together. You're still welcome to visit. How generous, she replied, sarcasm evident. I'll be sure to call ahead and make an appointment. Mom, please, Mark said wearily. Let's not do this. Diane turned to her son, her expression softening slightly. I just want what's best for you, Mark. I always have. I know, Mom, but I'm an adult. I get to decide what's best for me now, and what's best for me is supporting my marriage and respecting Elena's boundaries. Diane's face tightened again. So, I've heard, repeatedly. She picked up her purse. Walter, I'll wait in the car. After she swept out, Walter sighed heavily. Give her time. This is a significant adjustment for her. How much time? Mark asked, frustration evident. Because I'm tired of walking on eggshells around her emotions. That's a fair question, Walter acknowledged. And one I don't have a perfect answer for. But I'm working on it with her, for all our sakes. He embraced his son, then turned to me, offering his hand. I took it, but then stepped forward to give him a brief hug instead. Thank you, Walter, for understanding. Thank you for having the courage to draw the line, he replied quietly. It was long overdue. We walked them to the car, where Diane sat rigidly in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. She rolled down her window briefly. Mark, I expect you'll call me tonight, to check that we're settled properly. It wasn't a question or a request, but a command. One last attempt to maintain control. Mark hesitated, and I could see him, teetering on the edge of his old pattern, ready to acquiesce to keep the peace. Actually, he said slowly, Elena and I have plans tonight. I'll call you tomorrow to check in. Diane's face registered shock, then hurt, then anger in rapid succession. I see. Well, don't trouble yourself if you're too busy. Walter started the car before she could say more. We'll be fine, Mark. Enjoy your evening. We'll talk tomorrow. As they drove away, Mark stood very still, watching until they turned the corner and disappeared. You okay? I asked softly. I think so. He seemed surprised by his own answer. That was the first time I've ever directly said no to one of her expectations. It felt strange, but good. I'm proud of you. I took his hand. I know. That wasn't easy. Easier than I expected, actually. He squeezed my fingers. Maybe because I finally understand what I've been risking by always saying yes to her. We went back inside, the house suddenly feeling larger, emptier, and infinitely more peaceful. Mark walked through the living room, touching furniture that had been returned to its proper place, looking around as if seeing the space with new eyes. It's weird, he said finally. I didn't realize how tense I've been until they left, like I've been holding my breath for days. I know exactly what you mean. He pulled me into a hug, holding me tightly. Thank you for fighting for us when I was too afraid to do it myself. Just don't make me do it alone again, I whispered against his chest. Never, he promised. From now on, we're a team. Against my parents, against the world. Whatever comes our way. The rest of the day passed in a strange, almost honeymoon-like atmosphere. We moved through our home reclaiming spaces, removing traces of Diane's brief but impactful residence. I found my spices rearranged, my cookbooks reorganized, even my shampoo replaced with a brand Diane preferred. Each discovery was both irritating and oddly amusing now that they were gone. In my office, I was relieved to find most things untouched. Though my desk chair had been swapped for one from the dining room, apparently Diane found my ergonomic chair unsightly. Mark helped me switch them back, shaking his head at his mother's audacity. I never realized how much she just changes without asking, he admitted. When you live with it your whole life, I guess you stop noticing. Or you learn it's easier not to object, I suggested gently. Yeah, that too. He looked thoughtful. You know, I think the last time I directly contradicted her before all this was in college, when I changed my major from business to computer science. She didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of silent treatment for choosing your own major? That's extreme, Mark. I know, but at the time, it felt devastating. Like I'd done something terrible by disappointing her. He ran a hand through his hair. So Mom stopped disappointing her. Became the son she wanted, even when it went against what I wanted. Until now. Until now, he agreed. Until you showed me there's another way to live. To love family without being controlled by them. His words echoed Walter's from that morning, making me wonder just how profoundly Diane's control had shaped both men's lives, and how breaking free from it might transform them. In the afternoon, I returned to work on the Henderson project while Mark caught up on his own assignments. The normalcy felt luxurious after days of disruption. Around 4, I received an email from Janet Henderson approving my final designs with enthusiastic praise, a perfect end to an emotionally exhausting week. As I closed my laptop, my phone rang, Zoe checking in. The in-laws' exodus was today, right? How did it go? She asked without preamble. Surprisingly well, I replied. Diane was frosty but controlled. Walter was actually supportive, and they're gone, which is the important part. No last-minute dramatics? No tearful scenes? Or guilt trips? Some minor guilt tripping, but nothing Mark couldn't handle. I smiled, remembering his calm refusal of Diane's demand. Actually, he stood up to her. Really stood up to her. Maybe for the first time in his adult life. Wow. Character development. I love it. Zoe's tone turned more serious. And how are you two doing? After all the legal threats and revelations? We're healing. Talking more openly than we have in months. Years, maybe. I glanced toward the door, lowering my voice slightly. I think this might have been the wake-up call our marriage needed. Sometimes it takes a crisis to create change, Zoe observed. The question is whether it sticks when things calm down. That's what I'm wondering, too. I sighed. Walter told me some things this morning about Mark's sister, how Diane essentially cut her off for not following the Mitchell way. I'm worried about long-term consequences if Diane decides to punish Mark the same way. Do you think she would? I think she's capable of it. The question is whether Mark can withstand that kind of emotional manipulation now that he's seen it for what it is. Only time will tell, Zoe said. But he has you in his corner this time. That makes a difference. After we hung up, I sat, thinking about Zoe's words. Mark did have me in his corner, but would that be enough against a lifetime of conditioning? Walter's revelations about Beth suggested Diane's capacity for holding grudges was significant. If she decided to punish Mark for his betrayal, would he stay strong or eventually capitulate to restore peace? I was still pondering this when Mark appeared in my office doorway. Hey, he said, looking pleased with himself. I made dinner reservations. That Italian place you love in the Pearl District. to celebrate our first evening of peace and quiet. That sounds perfect. I smiled, pushing aside my worries. Tonight was for celebrating small victories, not anticipating future battles. We dressed for dinner with a festive air, as if it were a special occasion, which, in many ways, it was. The restoration of our home, the establishment of boundaries, the strengthening of our partnership, all worth commemorating. At the restaurant, tucked into a cozy corner table with candles and wine, Mark raised his glass in a toast. To us, he said, and to our home, which, deed technicalities aside, really does belong to both of us. To us, I agreed, clinking my glass against his, and to new beginnings. We talked about everything and nothing, work projects, future vacation plans, a movie we wanted to see that weekend. Normal, couple things that had nothing to do with family drama or boundary violations. It felt like rediscovering each other after a long separation. Halfway through our entrees, Mark's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression tightening slightly. Mom? I guessed. Yeah. He silenced the phone without answering. She knows we have plans tonight. She can wait until tomorrow. I studied his face, looking for signs of the guilt or anxiety that usually accompanied any defiance of Diane's wishes. Instead, I saw calm resolve. You're really doing this, I said, a little amazed. Setting boundaries and sticking to them. I'm trying. He reached for my hand across the table. For us. For me, too. It feels liberating. And terrifying? A little, he admitted with a small laugh. I keep waiting for the sky to fall, for some catastrophic consequence. That's how it always felt as a kid when I disappointed her, like something terrible would happen. Nothing terrible is going to happen, I assured him. She might be upset. She might withdraw temporarily, but ultimately she's your mother. She loves you. In her way, Mark said thoughtfully. With conditions and expectations. Not like... He trailed off. Not like what? Not like you do. His eyes held mine. Unconditionally. Even when I was failing you by not standing up to them, you still loved me enough to fight for us. My throat tightened with emotion. Always, I managed. The rest of dinner passed in, a warm glow of reconnection. By the time we headed home, it felt as if a weight had lifted from both of us, leaving space for joy and possibility. In our kitchen, shedding coats and shoes, Mark checked his phone again. 3 missed calls from Mom, 1 from Dad, and several texts. Are you going to call back tonight? He considered, then shook his head. No, I told her I'd call tomorrow. And I will. Tonight is for us. He silenced his phone and placed it face down on the counter, a small act of independence that spoke volumes. Later, as we prepared for bed, Mark brought up Walter's comments about his sister. Dad mentioned, Beth to you this morning? Yes. He said there's distance because she didn't follow your mother's life plan for her. Mark nodded slowly. That's the simplified version. The reality was messier. Tell me, I encouraged gently. He sat on the edge of our bed, looking thoughtful. Beth was always more defiant than me, more willing to challenge Mom's authority. When she fell in love with David, her husband, Mom disapproved because he was only a high school teacher, not a professional with status. That's ridiculous. To us, yes. To Mom, status and appearance are everything. Mark sighed. Beth married him anyway. Mom retaliated by barely participating in the wedding planning, criticizing every choice Beth made, and generally making the experience miserable. That's awful. It gets worse. After the wedding, Mom's criticism extended to their home, their lifestyle choices, their parenting decisions once the kids came along. Nothing was ever good enough. Eventually, Beth set boundaries, told Mom she could visit only if she kept her opinions to herself. Let me guess, Diane couldn't do that. Not even for an hour. Mark smiled ruefully. The final straw was when Mom reorganized Beth's kitchen during a visit, throwing out appliances she deemed unnecessary and rearranging everything to her liking. Sound familiar? Painfully so. Beth asked them to leave. Mom refused. David had to physically escort them out. Mark shook his head at the memory. Mom declared Beth unstable and influenced by her controlling husband. The irony was completely lost on her. And since then? Limited contact, holiday calls. Beth refuses to visit unless Mom apologizes, which Mom refuses to do because she thinks she did nothing wrong. Dad tries to mediate, but ultimately sides with Mom to keep the peace. And you? Mark looked down. I've stayed out of it. Maintained relationships with both sides, but never confronted the underlying issue. The path of least resistance. Until now. Until now, he agreed. Until you helped me see that I was just enabling Mom's behavior. Like Dad has all these years. I sat beside him, taking his hand. Do you think what happened with Beth will happen with us? It might, he admitted. Mom doesn't tolerate defiance. Well, and she'll see our boundary setting as defiance, not healthy adult behavior. Are you prepared for that possibility? He was quiet for a long moment. I think I have to be. Because the alternative is losing you. And that's unacceptable. I leaned against him, both heartened by his commitment and concerned about the family rift that might be widening. Maybe we should reach out to Beth. Let her know she's not alone anymore. Mark looked surprised, then thoughtful. I'd like that. It's been too long since I've really talked to my sister. Later, as we lay in bed in the darkness, Mark whispered, I keep thinking about the house being in your name. What about it? I asked sleepily. It's strangely perfect. The one thing that finally forced change was something you had all along, but never needed to use until absolutely necessary. He pulled me closer. Just like your strength. It was always there, but you only wielded it when you had to. Poetic, I murmured, smiling against his shoulder. I mean it. His voice held wonder. You could have used that information at any time to control our decisions about the house. But you didn't. You only used it when it became necessary to protect us both. That's what love is, I said simply. Using power to protect, not to control. A lesson my mother never learned, Mark observed quietly. But one you have, I assured him, and that makes all the difference. We fell asleep entwined, our home peaceful, and truly ours again. The battle for boundaries had been intense but necessary, and in its aftermath, something new and stronger was emerging. Not just in our marriage, but in Mark himself. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Diane's calls would need to be returned. Walter's revelations would need to be addressed. The separation papers, still sitting on Mark's nightstand, would need to be properly dealt with. But tonight, in the quiet of our reclaimed space, all that mattered was the solid foundation. We were rebuilding, stronger than before. The house deed with my name alone had indeed changed everything, not by giving me leverage over Mark, but by giving us both the clarity to see what truly mattered. Each other, and the home we created together, not just in physical space, but in our hearts. Morning light filtered through the curtains, waking me to the unfamiliar sound of complete silence. No kitchen cabinets opening and closing, no Diane rearranging furniture or issuing directions to Walter. Just the peaceful quiet of our home, restored to us. Mark was already awake beside me, scrolling through his phone with a troubled expression. Everything okay? I asked, propping myself up on one elbow. Mom sent about 20 texts last night, each one more urgent than the last. He showed me the screen, where I could see messages escalating from, "Call me when you get this," to, "Walter, Isn't feeling well. We might need to go to the ER. My stomach clenched. Is your dad okay? Yes. I just called him directly. He was surprised by my concern. Said he felt fine, just tired from the move. Mark's expression darkened. Mom made it up to get my attention. That's manipulative. It's emotional blackmail, Mark said, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. Using Dad's health to punish me for not calling last night. I sat up fully, concerned by the anger in his tone. What are you going to do? I'm going to call her and set another boundary. He stood, pacing our bedroom. This crosses a line, Elena. Using fake medical emergencies as control tactics? What if there's a real emergency someday? How would I even know? The shift in Mark was striking. Just days ago, he would have immediately called Diane back, apologetic and eager to please. Now he was recognizing and naming her manipulation for what it was. Do you want me there when you call? I offered. He considered, then nodded. Yes, for moral support, but I need to do the talking. We moved to the kitchen, making coffee while Mark prepared himself for the conversation. When he finally dialed Diane's number, he put the phone on speaker and placed it on the counter between us. Mark, finally! Diane's voice was sharp with reproach. I was worried sick when you didn't answer last night. Good morning, Mom, Mark replied, his tone deliberately calm. I spoke with Dad a few minutes ago. He says he's feeling fine. A brief pause. Well, he was having chest pains last night. You know how he downplays his symptoms. Mom, Mark said firmly, I need you to listen carefully. What you did, claiming Dad had a medical emergency when he didn't, is not okay. It's manipulative, and it damages my trust in you. I never said it was an emergency, Diane protested. I said he wasn't feeling well, which was true. And if you had called like you were supposed to... I told you I would call today, and I am calling today, Mark interrupted. I had plans with my wife last night, which you knew about. Plans that were apparently more important than checking on your parents after we were forced to leave our son's home. Diane's voice dripped with hurt. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Mom. The guilt trips, the manipulation, the exaggeration. Mark's voice remained steady. It has to stop if we're going to have a healthy relationship going forward. I don't know what's happened to you, Diane said, her tone shifting to wounded disbelief. Ever since that woman... Elena, Mark cut in sharply. My wife's name is Elena, and you will refer to her respectfully, or this conversation ends now. I stared at him, astonished by his firmness. Diane seemed equally shocked, as several seconds of silence followed. Fine, she finally said, her voice tight. Ever since Elena insisted on these new boundaries, you've been different, cold, distant, not like my son at all. I'm still your son, Mom. I'm just an adult son with his own life, his own home, and his own priorities, which include my marriage. Mark took a deep breath. I love you and Dad. I want you in my life. But it has to be on terms that respect my choices and my relationship with Elena. And if I find that difficult, Diane challenged, then you'll have a choice to make, Mark said quietly. Just like you did with Beth. Another shocked silence. Your sister chose to cut us off, Diane finally said, her voice defensive. We tried to help her, and she rejected us. That's not how Beth tells it, Mark replied. And frankly, after experiencing how you've treated Elena and our home, I'm inclined to believe her version. You're comparing situations that aren't remotely similar, aren't they? Rearranging our home without permission, criticizing Elena's choices, attempting to undermine her career, trying to control every aspect of our lives. Sounds pretty similar to what happened with Beth. I can't believe you're speaking to me this way. Diane's voice wavered between anger and hurt. After everything we've done for you. I'm speaking to you honestly, Mom. Maybe for the first time in my adult life. Mark's voice softened slightly. I don't want to lose you the way Beth did, but that means things have to change. Everything was fine until Elena decided, no, Mom. Everything wasn't fine. I just pretended it was to keep the peace. Mark looked at me, his eyes conveying silent apology and resolve. I'm not doing that anymore. For Elena's sake, for our marriage, and for my own well-being. Diane was quiet. For so long I thought she might have hung up. Finally she spoke, her voice cold and controlled. I see. Well, if that's how you feel, perhaps we should take some time to reevaluate our relationship. Please tell Elena she's gotten what she wanted. My son turned against his own mother. The line went dead before Mark could respond. He stared at the phone, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face: pain, frustration, relief, and something that looked almost like freedom. Are you okay? I asked softly. No, he admitted, but I will be. He looked up at me. She's going to cut me off for a while, try to punish me into submission like she did with Beth. Is it what you expected? Yes and no. He sighed, running, a hand through his hair. I knew she'd be upset. I didn't know I'd feel so relieved after standing up to her. I moved to embrace him, feeling his arms tighten around me. I'm proud of you, I whispered. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, he agreed. But it was necessary. He pulled back slightly to meet my eyes. I meant what I said, Elena. I'm done pretending everything's fine when it isn't. Done letting her manipulate and control us. Even if it means distance for a while? Even then. His resolve was clear. Because some distances heal more than they hurt. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Coffee today? Need updates on the in-law situation. I smiled, showing Mark the message. Mind if I go? I could use some friend time after all the drama. Go, he encouraged. I should call Dad anyway, make sure he's really okay and explain what happened with Mom. And Beth? I suggested gently. Maybe it's time to rebuild that bridge too. Mark nodded thoughtfully. Maybe it is. An hour later, I sat across from Zoe at Bridgetown Brews, recounting the morning's confrontation. He actually stood up to her? Zoe looked impressed. Directly challenged her manipulation? Yes, it was. Remarkable. I couldn't keep the pride from my voice. It's like watching someone break free from invisible chains, one link at a time. And how did the dragon lady take it? About how you'd expect. Hurt, defensive, eventually threatening to re-evaluate their relationship, which apparently means giving him the silent treatment until he falls back in line. Will he? Zoe asked the question I'd been asking myself. I don't think so, not this time. I stirred my coffee thoughtfully. Something shifted in him, Zoe. He's seeing her behavior clearly, maybe for the first time in his life. Thanks to you and your secret weapon deed, Zoe grinned. Still can't believe that worked out so perfectly. Like the universe was saving it for exactly when you needed it most. I never wanted to use it as leverage, I admitted. It felt manipulative. No more manipulative than his mother moving into your home without asking, Zoe pointed out. Sometimes we need to use the tools available to protect ourselves. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Just spoke with Beth. She's coming to visit next month. Just her. No kids or husband yet. Baby steps. I showed Zoe the message, my heart lifting with hope. He's rebuilding bridges his mother burned. Good for him, Zoe said sincerely. And good for you, for helping him find the courage to do it. I just held up a mirror, I said. He's the one choosing to really look at what he sees. When I returned home, I found Mark in the backyard, pruning the Japanese maple Diane had criticized. He looked up as I approached, a peaceful expression on his face. "Beth says hello," he said. "She's looking forward to meeting you when she visits." "I'm looking forward to it too." I sat on the garden bench, watching him work. "How did your talk with Walter go?" "Good, actually. He's not surprised by Mom's reaction. Says she'll sulk for a while, then try a different approach when it doesn't work." Mark set down his pruning shears, joining me on the bench. He also said something interesting, that he envies my courage to break the cycle now, while I still have something worth saving. Our marriage? That, and my own sense of self. Mark took my hand. "Dad thinks he waited too long. Let Mom's control become so ingrained in their relationship that he doesn't know who he'd be without it anymore." The implications were sobering. That's sad. It is, but it's also a warning. Mark looked at me intently. "I don't want that for us, Elena. I don't want to wake up 20 years from now and realize I sacrificed our happiness to appease my mother's need for control." "So what happens now? With your parents, I mean." "We wait. Let Mom process in her own way. Dad will try to mediate, as he always does." Mark smiled slightly. "And in the meantime, we live our lives. On our terms, in our home." "I like the sound of that," I said, leaning against him. The Japanese maple rustled in the gentle breeze, its delicate leaves catching the afternoon light. Diane had been wrong. It was in exactly the right spot. Perfect for this corner of our garden. Just as we were in the right spot together, finding our way through the complicated tangle of family and boundaries and love. The house deed with my name alone had changed everything. Not by giving me power over Mark, but by giving us both the clarity to see what truly mattered. Each other. Our partnership. And the home we were building together. Not just of wood and stone, but of mutual respect, shared vision, and boundaries strong enough to protect what we cherished most. Our phone rang from inside the house. Walter calling back, perhaps, or Zoe with some forgotten detail from our coffee date, but neither of us moved to answer it. This moment, in the peaceful garden of our reclaimed home, belonged just to us. Everything else could wait. 1 month later, I stood in our kitchen arranging a platter of finger foods, nervously checking the clock. Beth's flight would be landing in an hour, and Mark had left to pick her up from the airport. After weeks of phone calls and video chats, I was finally going to meet my sister-in-law in person. The past month had been transformative. After Diane's dramatic exit from our lives, punctuated by that final confrontational phone call, a strange peace had settled over our home and marriage. Mark had grown increasingly confident in maintaining boundaries, even as Diane cycled through various tactics to regain control. First came the silence, 10 days where she refused to speak to Mark at all, communicating only through Walter. When that failed to produce the desired capitulation, she shifted to guilt. Tearful voicemails about feeling abandoned, references to her advancing age and uncertain health. When Mark remained firm but compassionate, she tried bribery, offers, to help with house projects, suggestions of expensive gifts, even proposing to fund a vacation for just the two of you. Through it all, Mark held steady, navigating each approach with a grace that continually surprised me. He maintained contact with Walter, whose quiet support had become unexpectedly valuable, and most significantly, he'd rebuilt his relationship with Beth, rediscovering the sibling bond that had been strained by Diane's manipulations. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was too early for Mark and Beth. I opened the door to find Zoe holding a bottle of wine. "Reinforcements," she announced, stepping inside. "Figured you could use moral support for the big sister-in-law meeting." "You're a lifesaver," I said, accepting the wine gratefully. "Though Beth seems lovely on our video calls. Nothing like the monster Diane painted her as." "Still, family reunions can be tricky," Zoe said, following me to the kitchen. "Especially ones that involve healing from shared trauma." "Trauma seems like a strong word," I protested, though part of me wondered if it was accurate after all. Controlling parents leave their mark, Zoe said simply, helping herself to an olive from the platter. Sometimes the deepest wounds are the ones we don't recognize as wounds at all. I couldn't argue with that. Over the past month, I'd watched Mark uncover and examine patterns of behavior he'd never questioned before. His need for approval, his conflict avoidance, his tendency to sacrifice his own wants for others' expectations. Diane's influence ran deep, manifesting in ways neither of us had fully recognized until now. "Has the Dragon Lady made any direct contact with you?" Zoe asked, helping me arrange the food. "Not since they left. She speaks about me to Mark, but never to me." I smiled wryly. "I'm your wife, or on her more dramatic days, that woman." "Charming," Zoe deadpanned. "And Walter?" "He calls occasionally, always polite, asks about my projects, seems genuinely interested." I shrugged. "It's still awkward, but there's an authenticity to him now that wasn't there before." The sound of a car pulling into the driveway interrupted our conversation. My stomach fluttered with nervous anticipation. "Showtime," Zoe murmured, giving my arm a reassuring squeeze. I smoothed my dress and took a deep breath as the front door opened. Mark entered first, carrying a suitcase, his face alight with a joy I hadn't seen in years. Behind him came a slender woman with his same dark eyes and warm smile, though her hair was a lighter brown with artistic streaks of caramel. "Elena," Mark said, his voice warm with emotion. "This is my sister Beth. Beth, my wife, Elena." Beth stepped forward without hesitation and embraced me. "Finally," she said, her voice rich with feeling. "I've been waiting years to meet the woman brave enough to take on the Mitchell family drama." I laughed, returning her hug. "It's so good to meet you in person." "And this is my friend Zoe," I added as Beth released me. "The attorney who helped engineer the great Mitchell eviction," Beth said with a grin, shaking Zoe's hand. "Mark told me all about your role in the resistance." Zoe laughed. "I mostly provided moral support and occasional legal threats." "Never underestimate the power of a well-timed legal threat," Beth replied with feeling. "My husband's cease and desist letter bought us 6 months of peace after Mom's last boundary violation." The ice thoroughly broken, we moved to the living room with our wine and appetizers. Beth settled into an armchair, looking around with appreciation. "Your home is beautiful," she said, "and distinctly mom-free, which makes it even more beautiful." Mark chuckled. "You should have seen it when she was here. Rearranged furniture, new decorations appearing mysteriously, my ergonomic office chair banished to the basement." "Classic Diane," Beth nodded. "When she visited after Lily was born, I returned from a shower to find she'd completely reorganized the nursery and thrown out all the baby clothes she deemed impractical." "She did not," I gasped. "Oh, she did. That was the final straw for David. He told her either she respects our home and parenting choices, or she doesn't visit." Beth took a sip of wine. "She chose option 3, play the victim and tell everyone what a controlling monster my husband is." "Sounds familiar," Mark said, exchanging a knowing look with me. "So," Beth said, leaning forward eagerly, "tell me everything about the famous house deed showdown." Mark gave me the highlights, but I want all the delicious details. For the next hour, we recounted the entire saga. Diane and Walter's unexpected arrival, the escalating boundary violations, the financial deceptions, and finally, the confrontation. That changed everything. Beth listened with rapt attention, occasionally interjecting with similar stories from her own experiences. "The parallels are uncanny," she said when we finished. "It's like Mom has a playbook she follows whenever she encounters resistance." "Walter mentioned something similar," I said, "that there's a pattern to her behavior." "Dad's become surprisingly insightful lately," Beth observed. "Mark said he's been standing up to Mom more?" In his quiet way, yes, Mark confirmed. He calls me when she's not around, offers support, apologizes for enabling her behavior, all. These years, it's different. Good different? Healing different, Mark said thoughtfully. Like he's finally acknowledging his role in all of this instead of just passively going along. Beth looked wistful. I wish he'd found that courage years ago. Maybe we wouldn't have lost so much time. A somber mood settled over the room. I thought about the family photos Mark had shown me, the holidays and milestones Beth's family had experienced without the Mitchells present. 3 years of birthdays, Christmases, school performances, moments lost to Diane's pride and Walter's acquiescence. What about the kids? Mark asked, breaking the silence. How do they feel about potentially reconnecting with their grandparents? Cautiously curious, Beth replied. Lily remembers them a little. She was 5 when the big blow-up happened. Max was only 3, so his memories are fuzzy. David is supportive but protective. He wants assurances that Mom won't criticize them or try to take over. Understandable, I said. Has Diane indicated any interest in reconciliation? Beth's expression turned sardonic. Mom doesn't reconcile. She allows you back into her good graces once you've demonstrated sufficient repentance for opposing her. Which you haven't done, Mark observed with a small smile. Not even a little bit, Beth confirmed cheerfully. But with you standing your ground too, she's running out of children to manipulate. That might force some actual self-reflection. Or drive her to new heights of martyrdom, Zoe suggested dryly. We all laughed, the tension easing. Beth glanced at Mark with affection. I can't tell you how proud I am of you, little brother. Standing up to Mom takes more courage than most people realize. I had good examples, Mark said, looking between Beth and me. And a lot to lose if I didn't. The conversation flowed easily after that, moving away from Diane to happier topics. Beth's art gallery, her children's accomplishments, our renovation plans for the backyard. It struck me how natural it felt, as if Beth had always been part of our lives instead of a newly reclaimed relation. After dinner, while Mark showed Beth the guest room, Zoe helped me clean up in the kitchen. She's nothing like I expected, Zoe admitted. From the way you described Diane, I half expected her daughter to be a mess. I know, she's so normal, balanced. I rinsed plates for the dishwasher. Maybe standing up to Diane early saved her from deeper damage. Or maybe she just had better support, Zoe suggested. She mentioned her husband stood by her through everything. Mark had you. External perspective makes a difference when you're dealing with manipulation. I considered this as we finished cleaning. Was that the key difference? Having someone who could see the situation clearly, who wasn't enmeshed in the family dynamics? It seemed too simple an explanation for such complex emotional patterns, yet there was truth to it. Later, after Zoe had gone home and Beth had retired to the guest room, Mark and I sat on our back porch, enjoying the mild spring evening. Thank you, he said suddenly, taking my hand. For what? For making today possible, for standing your ground when I couldn't, for giving me back my sister. His eyes shone with emotion in the dim porch light. I'd forgotten how much I missed her. You did the hard work, I reminded him. You're the one who reached out, who maintained boundaries with your mother, who kept rebuilding despite Diane's attempts to derail everything. Because you showed me it was possible. He squeezed my fingers. Do you know what Beth said to me at the airport before we even reached the car? She said, I like her already because she helped you find your voice. Warmth spread through my chest at his words. Your voice was always there. It just needed space to be heard. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the neighborhood settle into evening. Finally, Mark spoke again, his tone contemplative. I've been thinking about the deed. What about it? How perfect it is that the house is legally yours, when you're the one who made it a true home. He turned to face me. I want to keep it that way. I blinked in surprise. You don't want to add your name to the deed? No. I like the symbolism of it. That legalities aside, we share everything equally. That our partnership isn't about whose name is on paper, but how we treat each other. He smiled. Besides, it's your inheritance, your grandmother's legacy. It should stay in your name. His words touched me deeply. The deed, which had once been leverage in a family power struggle, had transformed into something else entirely, a symbol of trust and partnership. I love you, I said simply, because nothing else seemed adequate. I love you too. He drew me closer, enough to fight dragons for you, even when they're disguised as my mother. I laughed softly, resting my head on his shoulder. Tomorrow would bring more conversations with Beth, more planning for potential family reconciliation, more navigation of the complex Mitchell dynamics. But tonight, in our home, legally mine but emotionally ours, everything was exactly as it should be. Morning brought sunshine streaming through the kitchen windows as I prepared breakfast. Beth appeared, looking refreshed despite the time zone difference from Chicago. Something smells amazing, she said, accepting the coffee I offered. My grandmother's cinnamon French toast recipe, I replied. Mark mentioned it was a favorite of yours growing up. Beth's expression softened. It was. Mom never made it. Too messy, too indulgent. But our housekeeper Maria would make it for us on special occasions. Well, I believe reuniting with your brother after years of manufactured distance qualifies as special, I said, flipping bread in the skillet. Manufactured distance, Beth repeated thoughtfully. That's exactly what it was. Not a natural growing apart, but something deliberately engineered by Mom's manipulation. Mark joined us, hair still damp from his shower. Are we talking about Mom before coffee? Brave. We're talking about manufactured distance, Beth informed him, passing him a mug, and how skillfully Mom created it between us. Mark nodded, his expression turning serious. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. How she's always controlled the family narrative. Who talks to whom, what information gets shared, how conflicts are framed. The Mitchell family information. Minister, Beth agreed wryly. Everything filtered through her preferred interpretation. It's a common control tactic, I observed, serving the French toast. Controlling the flow of information maintains power. Speaking of information control, Mark said, Dad called last night after you went to bed. Mom knows you're visiting. Beth raised an eyebrow. And? And she's hurt that you'd come see us but not her. Says it proves you're taking sides and perpetuating family division. Mark's tone was matter of fact, without the anxiety such messages from Diane would have previously caused him. Classic, Beth sighed, reframing her own controlling behavior as someone else's divisiveness. Dad also mentioned she's considering calling you herself, Mark added, to extend an olive branch. Beth nearly choked on her coffee. After 3 years of silence? Now that I'm connecting with you two independently of her approval, suddenly she wants to reconcile. It threatens her control, I said, joining them at the table. Your reconnection happened without her orchestration or permission. That's intolerable to someone like Diane. Exactly, Beth pointed her fork for emphasis. If she can't prevent the relationship, she'll try to insert herself into it, make it about her somehow. What will you do if she calls? Mark asked. Beth considered the question, cutting her French toast with deliberation. Listen, I suppose. Set clear boundaries. Make it understood that any relationship with me and my family comes with conditions. Respect for our autonomy, no criticism of our choices, no manipulation. Conditions Mom is constitutionally incapable of meeting, Mark observed. Probably, Beth agreed. But that's her choice. I'm done contorting myself to fit her expectations. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as we enjoyed breakfast. But I found myself pondering Beth's words. I'm done contorting myself. Such a simple statement, yet so profound in the context of Diane's influence. Both Mitchell children had spent decades twisting themselves to fit their mother's rigid mold. Mark through compliance, Beth through rebellion and eventual distance. Now both were finding their own shape, their authentic selves independent of Diane's expectations. After breakfast, we took Beth on a tour of Portland, showing her our favorite spots in the city. The day passed pleasantly, filled with laughter and conversation that flowed as if we'd known each other for years instead of a single day. We were having dinner at a local brewery when Beth's phone rang. She checked the screen, her expression shifting to surprise. "It's Mom," she said, showing us the display. Mark and I exchanged glances. "You don't have to answer," he said. "I know." Beth stared at the phone, still ringing. "But maybe I should. Set the tone from the beginning." She answered, putting the phone to her ear. "Hello, Mom." Her voice was neutral, neither warm nor cold. We could only hear Beth's side of the conversation, but it was enough to piece together Diane's approach. "Yes, I'm visiting Mark and Elena." "No, it wasn't planned long in advance." "Because it's my decision who I visit and when." "That's not accurate, Mom. You chose to cut contact when I set boundaries." "No, David didn't turn me against you. He supported me in establishing healthy boundaries that you refuse to respect." Beth's responses were calm but firm, not rising to the emotional bait Diane was clearly offering. Mark watched his sister with undisguised admiration, occasionally nodding at particularly direct responses. "I understand you see it differently. Yes, the children are fine. Growing fast. Perhaps someday, but that would depend on several factors. No, not conditions. Boundaries. There's a difference." The call continued for about 10 minutes, with Beth maintaining her composed demeanor throughout. Finally, she wrapped up the conversation. "I need to go now. We're having dinner." "Yes, I'll tell them. Goodbye, Mom." She set the phone down, exhaling slowly. Well, that was exactly as expected. "How so?" I asked, starting with wounded innocence about why I'm visiting you but not her, moving to revisionist history about our estrangement, followed by attempts to gather information about my family, ending with fishing for an invitation to visit, which I deflected. Beth took a long sip of her beer. "Oh, and she sends her warmest regards to both of you," which is Diane speak for "I'm pretending to be magnanimous while plotting revenge." Mark laughed despite himself. "Your ability to navigate her tactics is impressive." "Years of practice, therapy, and the perspective that comes with distance," Beth replied. "It gets easier to recognize the manipulation when you're not in the middle of it." "Will you consider letting her see the kids?" I asked carefully. Beth's expression turned thoughtful. "Maybe. With very strict parameters. Short visits, public locations, David or I present at all times." She sighed. "They deserve to know their grandparents, but not at the cost of their emotional well-being or our family peace." "That seems fair," Mark said. "More than fair, considering." "What about you two?" Beth asked. "Any plans for direct contact with her?" Mark and I exchanged glances. "We're taking it slowly," he said. "I talk to her briefly each week, keeping conversations light and redirecting when she tests boundaries. Elena hasn't spoken directly with her since they left. By Diane's choice, not mine," I clarified. "I'm open to civil interaction, but I won't pretend the past didn't happen." Beth nodded approvingly. "Healthy boundaries Mom hates them but needs them more than anyone I know. The rest of Beth's visit passed in a blend of sightseeing, deep conversations, and planning for the future. We discussed a potential family gathering later in the year, neutral territory where the Mitchell children and grandchildren could reconnect with minimal drama. Whether Diane and Walter would be included remained an open question, dependent on Diane's ability to respect boundaries in the intervening months. On Beth's last morning with us, as Mark loaded her suitcase into the car for the airport run, she pulled me into a warm hug. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For giving me my brother back, for creating a home where he could find his voice, for standing firm when it would have been easier to capitulate." Her eyes shone with emotion. "You've done what I couldn't. Helped him break free without breaking ties completely. He did the hard work himself," I insisted, "because you showed him it was possible." Beth smiled. "The house deed was just the catalyst. Your strength was the real agent of change." Her words stayed with me after she left, echoing as Mark and I readjusted to our normal routine. There was truth in what she said. The deed had been merely a tool, a lever to shift a stuck situation. The real work had been in the boundaries we established, the unity we maintained, the vision of partnership we defended. 2 days after Beth's departure, we received an unexpected delivery, a large, flat package addressed to both of us. Inside was a painting, clearly Beth's work, depicting a craftsman house much like ours, bathed in warm light, with the silhouettes of 2 figures visible through the windows. The accompanying note read simply, "Home isn't about whose name is on the deed. It's about who makes the space sacred with love and respect. Thank you both for showing Mom what she never understood, that true family supports rather than controls. Love, Beth." We hung the painting in our living room, a visible reminder of what we'd fought for and won, not just a physical space, but the right to define our relationship on our own terms. A week later, Walter called with news. Diane wanted to have dinner. With us. A fresh start, she called it. No mentions of the past conflict, just a chance to begin again with clearer understanding. Mark looked to me, the question in his eyes. I nodded slowly. Not because I believed Diane had truly changed, but because maintaining this estrangement indefinitely served no one. Better to establish a new dynamic, one with clear boundaries and expectations, than to perpetuate a Cold War. "We'll come to dinner," Mark told his father. "But with conditions. No criticism of our home, our choices, or our relationship. No attempts to take over the conversation or dictate terms. And a commitment to respect our boundaries going forward." There was a pause as Walter presumably relayed these conditions to Diane. When he returned to the phone, his voice held a note of surprised respect. "She agrees. Next Saturday at the Riverview restaurant. She's trying, Mark. That's all I can promise." After he hung up, Mark turned to me with a mixture of apprehension and resolve. "Are we really doing this?" "We are," I confirmed. "On our terms, not hers. That's the difference." He nodded, drawing me close. "Our terms, our boundaries, our life." I leaned into his embrace, thinking about the journey that had brought us here. From the shock of finding Diane rearranging our living room to the triumph of reclaiming our space and our relationship. The house deed with my name alone had indeed changed everything, not by giving me power over Mark, but by giving us both the courage to stand firm against external control. Whatever happened with Diane, whether she found the capacity to change or merely adapted her tactics to the new reality, one thing was certain. Mark and I would face it together, partners in the truest sense. The home we'd built wasn't just in the physical structure of wood and stone, but in the strong foundation of mutual respect and shared boundaries we'd established. The future would bring its challenges. Diane would test limits. Walter would navigate his divided loyalties. and Mark would continue to unravel years of conditioned responses. But we had proven our resilience. We had found our voices. And most importantly, we had discovered that sometimes the most powerful act of love isn't accommodation or sacrifice, but the courage to say no to those who would diminish what we've built together. Our house, legally mine but emotionally ours, stood as testament to that truth. A home defined not by a deed, but by the boundaries we honored and the love we nurtured within its walls. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.